36 on February 10th, 2021. And I'm going to read the required language. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Chapter 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Advisory Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Alrighty, so hello everyone. Jason, for those that didn't hear, has been called to a fire in Boxborough. I think everybody knows he is a fireman. He's not just a volunteer fireman, he is a fireman. So he's on the way there. He normally runs these meetings for us as far as the technology, but I think we know what to do, so I think we'll be okay. I've got Chelsea Malinowski standing by if I need her, so I think we'll be okay. All right, so we're going to jump around a little bit because of schedules. So Mr. Stivers has graciously agreed to join us to basically discuss the two articles that last time we said we weren't going to hear from again, but I reread them and I think we should, because we actually did support one of them. We had a 4-2 vote. Andrew D. and Mr. Mooney voted against that one. I don't know who the seventh person who wasn't here that night was, so it was a 4-2 vote. And then the next one, it was a 1-5 vote with Judy voting for and 5 voting against. Sam has been he's responsible for these two articles being here, so I wanted to give him a chance to explain them again quickly, and then we're going to vote on those two tonight. So Sam, hello.
Thank you. Hello. Feels like Groundhog Day. It's 10 years ago and I'm back on advisory committee.
Yeah, you're always welcome back. And everybody, I emailed you a few minutes ago the actual draft warrant. So if you want to take a look at it, it's articles, at least for now, articles 30, and 31. Okay, Sam.
Okay. I proposed these after we started getting a number of complaints about speeding on various roads. Places like Parkerville, Middle Road, Deerfoot, Flag, Pine Hill. Kathy, we've got some reports of drag racing going on there. You've been out with your car, your fast car there maybe, but
that was me.
Are you the one who almost ran over Al Hamilton?
Yeah, that was me. You just didn't know it yet.
Good. So anyway, I did a little digging and discovered that there are two state laws that a town can accept to deal with this. One of them, I can't remember the numbers on them now, but one of them allows a town to accept a particular provision in state law, chapter 90, section 17C or something, I think it is, that allows a town to establish a speed limit of 25 miles per hour on any town road that is thickly settled. And thickly settled means that there are houses within 200 feet of each other, an average distance of 200 feet within any quarter mile, I think it is, on that road. And towns have used this. There are now, I think I counted over 50 towns that have adopted this particular provision. Some towns, including Framingham, have actually done it town-wide. Many towns do it on particular streets that they have concerns about. So this is something that if we adopt it, we don't have to use it. It's our choice. And it's, to me at least, another tool in the arsenal to deal with particular issues in specific parts of town. So it is a fairly flexible one. We can do it and use it when we feel it's appropriate. And it's my understanding we can actually reset it back to whatever the limit was before we changed it at our discretion. So again, I don't have any specific street in mind, but I think that it's a useful tool to have. And if we have it available, if the town meeting accepts this, then if we've got an issue, we can react fairly quickly versus waiting till the next year to actually deal with the issue this way, if we choose to do it this way. I'll talk about the other one as well, because they sort of go together. The other one allows a town to accept, again, another part or section of state law to reset a speed limit to 20 miles per hour in a so-called safety zone. And the requirements for this are more stringent. You have to do a traffic study, traffic engineer, and get MassDOT approval to do it. So it's a more cumbersome process. But again, it's another tool if you've got a particular issue, let's say around a school area, for example, where you have concern about people speeding. I think maybe in the flagged Deerfoot area, there's some interesting crosswalk areas there, no sidewalks, et cetera, that might be an interesting place to consider for something like this. But again, it's something that the town may do if we've adopted this particular section of state law. We don't have to use it at all, ever, if we don't choose to. But again, if we have it available and there's an issue, we can respond much more quickly with it, although it still requires a fair amount additional engineering effort and get MassDOT approval for it. So it's not something you can do overnight, but at least you could do it probably before the next town meeting. So that was the rationale for them to, again, expand our range of choices to be able to deal with these issues. And it seems to me that's not an unreasonable thing to have available to us. So that's why I proposed it. So any questions? That's my pitch.
Andrew Pfaff?
Yeah, so Sam, when I lived in Melrose, we did this and did a 25 mile an hour citywide. I think it was good. So I'm certainly in favor of it. I think one of the questions when we put it in is it doesn't cover state roads, I believe.
You're right. We can't do it on a state highway. The state retains jurisdiction on state highways. I should have.
And I think when we talk about this in terms of people from town, I don't believe there's many state roads in town. The numbered roads aren't necessarily state roads. So my question was more along I think 85 is not a state road, right? And
I'm actually not sure about that. I defer to Karen Galligan on those questions, so I don't really know. But I agree. It's not obvious for some of these roads. You would guess it.
But I think maybe, if we can get from Karen which roads this could be enacted on that aren't state roads, I think that would be certainly good for the telling of this. But I live on Oak Hill and it's a 35 or a 40 mile an hour and definitely thickly settled. And I would look forward to a 25 mile an hour sign there.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
I will do a little more research on that. Thanks for the question. That's a good one. How about the 20 mile an hour one?
20 mile an hour one, I think also makes perfect sense. I mean, the question is where do you by Woodward, whereas maybe it's a little more busy, makes sense. Parkerville, by the schools, certainly. I think, that certainly makes sense. I think you just have to go through the little studies and all the kind of stuff that you have to do along that. But I think both are certainly valid and good. I think in terms of the impact on people in town, I think this impacts more people outside of town. I think mostly people in town can pretty quickly get to a state road or a road that maybe we wouldn't put 25 miles an hour on. But it probably impacts more people that are trying to cut through Southborough to get to Route 9 or the Mass Pike or 495. So I think from a community, it certainly makes sense. I mean, again, I live on Oak Hill and I can tell you the majority of people going 45, 50 miles an hour down my street are not people that live in Southborough on the very corner of town. It's mostly people from Ashland or Hopkinton cutting through. So I'd be in favor of it.
I'm going to propose the toll booth option next week to be able to collect some money from them.
We need revenue.
Exactly.
And Sam, just one thing is I know when we did it in Melrose, I believe they set aside 5,000 or 10,000 or so for new signage. I just want to make sure that we have Karen set aside some money or something if we need to replace signs and things like that.
Good point. Thank you.
That's it for me.
Andrew D.
Yeah, so I think, Kathy, what you said, I voted against this last time. And, I understand the issue a little bit more. Sam, I think what you're saying is that this is a bylaw which is just going to permit the Board of Selectmen to do this. It's not a decision to reduce the speed limit on any particular road, or so that's why, Andrew, I think actually that would be very premature, right? Because we haven't even made a decision about where it would happen. I mean, my general concern, I think why I voted against it the last time, is I think I drive very safely, but it's sometimes even hard to drive 20 miles an hour. And I think that, you know, who and how does the law get enforced when you have a speed limit which is so arbitrarily low, and you almost don't even realistically expect people to drive that slow, that it makes the enforcement of the law very arbitrary. So that, you know, that is what it is. But, you know, I think I would now be inclined, after I've thought this through actually over the last year, to be supportive of it. And, you know, the 20 mile an hour, I understand you made this point clear, right? This is something where you couldn't just rush to. The Massachusetts Department of Transportation would need to support. What about like schools around, for example, if you go north on Parkerville Road by the Finn School, there's a flashing thing.
Yeah.
Is it a
School zone
difference?
can be 20 mile an hour. The state transportation laws allow that. And Andrew, a good point. I absolutely would never, at least as far as I can tell now, support a 25 mile an hour speed limit throughout town. I think that is unrealistic, and I think you would never be able to enforce that, certainly. But I see this as a very targeted kind of tool here for a particular issue, particular area of town, and with fairly specific areas. I think the police. I've heard the chief talk about the ability to enforce things in targeted areas as opposed to sort of general enforcement, which gets to be much of a problem.
So this permits you, if a group of people, families that live on one road, say cars are speeding too fast on this road, we would like you to reduce the speed limit. You could actually consider it and, you know, hold a hearing and do something, rather than saying we can't even do anything.
Exactly.
We need to,
which is sort of what we say today. We can put flashing lights out there and think about a speed bump or something, but those are limited tools today.
Okay, thank you.
Judy,
No, I think it's a good idea.
you like them both? You like them both? Okay. So no questions?
No, I have no question.
Mr. Mooney?
Yeah, my concern was the same as Andrew's last time. I have no problem vesting with the selectmen this authority to begin the inquiry with regards to the speed limit. And Sam, I think you said my position as well, is that I would be opposed to a blanket 25 mile an hour restriction throughout the entire town without at least knowing in advance which streets or roads are in fact town owned or town responsibility as opposed to state responsibility. That's all.
I would see this as a public hearing process, John,
Right.
to review and communicate and give people a chance to, you know, comment on it, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, because you could end up in the anomalous situation where a group of residents, say on Smith Street, was successful in a 25 mile an hour. Then the very next street over, in which case there is no advocacy. What would that be relative to the inconsistencies? That's all.
Right.
But you're right, in terms of a traffic study or analysis, more would have to be done to get me on board with an across the board 25 mile an hour zone.
Yeah. And John, I've felt sort of frustrated as we've gotten some very specific complaints from places that we don't seem to have many tools available to deal with that. And so again, I just see this as expanding our options, but it would be through a public process. And for the 20, clearly a substantial engineering effort goes into it before it would get approved.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
So Tim, I saw your chat. I know you're having internet trouble, and you're muted, so I don't know if it's cleared up or not. I'm going to keep going, and if you want to say something, why don't you send another chat? And I don't see another one, so I'm going to assume that you
He
can't say
said
anything at the moment.
state roads. Oh, it's Tim Lit. Okay, never mind.
Okay, and that's from Tim Litt. Okay, so Sam, are you saying that the BOS is going to have a public hearing to discuss these two, you think?
We will we will actually have a meeting to talk about our position on the warrant articles. There's not a hearing scheduled for these two particularly. My comment was that if we actually have a situation where we want to change the speed limit on a particular road,
Okay, I get it.
I would certainly push hard for a public hearing, announcing it, having people have an opportunity to comment on it and sort out if that's something that the public thinks would solve a particular problem that we're trying to solve or would create other problems.
Okay, that makes sense. Is this a 2/3 vote? Is this considered zoning?
No, this is not a zoning bylaw. This is just accepting a state law.
So right now, can you impose 30? Is that the law right now? Or the two?
I think that's the law generally. Yeah.
Okay. So here's my story. So Pine Hill Road is a cut-through road, just like Andrew described Oak. So people cut through from Framingham and Marlboro to get to the Pike on Pine Hill, and people drive crazy. So it's not me drag racing, but people do drag race on a specific part of it. So the neighborhood got together, went to the BOS last year, and complained pretty vocally about the issues. I mean, it was scary. There were accidents, lots of things, and so many close calls. So what was done is they added the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, and they put driver feedback signs on the road. Then they also striped the middle of it so people could stay on the right side of the road, because it's a really narrow road. It's hard for, two buses would have trouble, truly can't pass. They actually got stuck one time when they tried to pass. And it's improved things immensely, especially the stripe. I mean, because now you can really stay on your side of the road without worrying about it. But I do believe most people do see that feedback sign, and they may not go down to 30 completely, but they do take their foot off the accelerator when they see it. So it's definitely improved things for sure. I just have trouble. It's hard to go down to 30. Going down to 25, you'd have to take your foot off the accelerator and almost put on your brakes. So it's still going to be hard to drive 25 miles an hour. And I would be very unhappy if I got a ticket for going 26 into 25. But it sounds like you're going to get support advisory, Sam, on both of them at this point. And last year you got one. Board of Selectmen supported both of them, and we did not support the second one. Judy did, but that was it. Okay, so does everybody want to vote on this tonight, or do you want to wait? Is there anything really to wait for at this point? Are you happy to get these two out of the way?
So
Let's
Jason
vote.
and Tim.
I can make a motion if you like.
All right, so go ahead, Andrew.
I move that the advisory committee support Article 30 at town meeting.
Second.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Right, so I think we've lost Tim, but we still have a quorum, so I'm going to keep going until we see him come back. So all in favor of Article 30, which is reducing the speed limit possibly from 30 to 25.
No, Kathy, I'm not sure that's we're not agreeing to.
That's right.
reducing, we're just agreeing that vest the Board of Selectmen with the authority. Is that correct, Sam?
Yeah, that's what I tried to say, that
Right,
they
yes.
got the ability to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so Tim may be back. I hope he is. Okay, so we've got a motion and a second, so roll call vote. Judy?
Did Tim have a chance to ask any questions, Kathy?
I'm
Now
good,
I think
Sam.
you can.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
Okay, Tim? Okay,
Yes.
here we go. So Judy,
Yes, Bud's eye.
Cook, aye. Andrew D?
Aye.
Jason's not here. Mr. Martell?
Aye.
Mr. Pfaff?
Aye.
Mr. Rooney?
Aye.
Okay, so Claire, make sure you record those votes exactly. I've got the matrix set up that I'll put them into, so 6-0. Okay, so we've got two done. So thank you, Sam. Sam's got another meeting tonight. That's why I started it.
How about the other one for 20 speed limit and safety zone?
Oh, sorry, Sam. Sorry. Okay, Andrew, go ahead.
I was going to do them separately, if that's okay.
Yeah.
You
yeah,
did.
just
We
do
did the
one.
first one. So now this is Article 31.
I move that the advisory committee support Article 31 at
Second.
town meeting.
Before you do it, can you correct that and say Article 31 on the draft warrant in case these numbers change?
Article 31 on the draft warrant.
Okay.
Okay. Second.
Any further discussion on 31, which is the safety zone, possibility of creating safety zones? Mhm. Andrew D? Sorry, Judy. Sorry. Sorry.
That's my
Judy.
motion. Do you want me to restate it?
Nope, it's fine. So I roll call vote. Judy?
Okay, Bud's yes.
Andrew D?
Aye.
Mr. Martell?
Aye.
Cook is aye. Mr. Pfaff?
Aye.
Mr. Rooney?
Aye.
Okay, so Claire 6-0 on draft 31.
Okay, thanks very much, folks, for getting me in here. I've got to get to another meeting, so I appreciate the chance to chat. Life on Zoom. Good to be back in the advisory saddle here.
Yeah,
Temporarily,
yeah,
at least.
yeah.
It's good to see you, Sam.
See you guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
All right, so we're going to go to Mr. Haggerty next so that he can go home. All right, let's get off this. He's probably already home. So I'm going to bring Jim in. Huh. Hey, Jim. You're muted.
How are you?
We're fine. That's a nice picture.
Yeah. Not much clearer on the top of my head.
Okay, so Jim, before we get started, is there anything you want advisory to know about anything going on that would be in our bailiwick?
You mean about my budget or just overall?
No, we'll get to your budget. Just overall, you're always the source of
Okay.
knowledge. So I just want to make sure there's anything that you want us to know that we may not
Sure.
know.
Yeah, there's one thing. I had a couple of conversations with folks in the selectman's office this afternoon to trying to square something away here. This seems, and they're going to try to get to the bottom of it, but the gist of it is the legislation that allows the moderator to postpone a town meeting is dependent upon the Board of Selectmen first posting a town meeting. All right, that's the way the legislation was written last year. So what that means is that the bylaw requires I think it's the 27th, I think of March, has to be posted at least 7 days ahead of time. So I guess what I throw out there is that the window between now and when this warrant has to be wrapped up is rapidly winnowing. And there are a number of boards and committees in town that think that they have until April to sort of get everything wrapped up.
Yes, they do, because we were told that specifically.
So
that was asked.
So there's I spoke to Mr. Healy tonight about this, and he's going to look into what leeway, and he'll come up with his opinion on this. But town council and the moderator concur with what I just said to you. So there you go. So.
And it's even sooner than that, because the meeting was going to be on the 20th, because the 27th is Passover, I think. So it was going to be the 20th. So it's even a shorter window than you said.
Yeah, it has to be posted a minimum 7 days in advance, and then you have, anyway, the point of it is the window is shrinking, and perhaps there'll be some alternative view to this. I'm not aware of this, but like I just got back to work Monday after being out for a month, so when I read this stuff, I reached out to town council and Semino, and they both were on board. So moderator, I should say. So anyway, just as a heads up on that, the calendar's spinning. So.
All right. Well, I'm glad I asked. We won't be done, but that's okay. We'll get done by town meeting, and we'll just have to vote after the warrant gets posted, if that's what's going to happen. But we were told that the warrant would not get posted till later, so we should have until the end of April.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go to your budget.
Okay.
Okay. So I circulated the budget, everybody, on an email not too long ago, in case you want to look at it that way. It's a very pleasant budget to look at.
Well, there's an even more pleasant budget that I gave to Brian Valentine today.
Yeah, so that's the one I circulated, Jim.
Okay.
Is that one. So it's a current one. And ClearGov has been updated, so he got to it really fast.
Okay.
Did you put in ClearGov, or did Brian put it in for you? Are you putting your own?
Brian did it once they consolidate them. The departments then can't adjust them. So Brian entered the data for me this afternoon.
Okay.
Should be a total of 155,475.
Yep, and that's what I circulated. So let us know what you want us to know.
Sure. The big downward drive, roughly $30,000 of this is just frankly due to fewer elections. That involves labor, overtime, supplies, and food. It also eliminates all in-person training and associated travel for that. That's another $3,700 down. The drivers on the increase, you have SAP, a 2.8% increase is $2,700. I have a grade change for an employee that's $1,400. There's an extra $1,500 in here over typical years for updating the town code, because there's an incredible number of, this warrant includes the most I've seen by far changes to the town code and adoptions of articles. So I expect to have a sizable bill from the vendor that maintains our town code. And finally, we have $4,400 in here to get storage of the clerk's old material in an environmentally controlled room at Iron Mountain. This is something we've never done in the past, but honestly, I've given up on trying to solve the issues of using the shoebox of a vault we have. It is, for those of you who've seen it in my office, I mean, I can't even stand up in the room anymore. It's pretty much the area under the stairs as you walk from the first floor to the second floor from the front of that. The outside of that building faces southeast, so it's a kiln in the summer. The outside wall is brick. It is unheated. It is there's no ventilation in there. There's no cooling, and I've had hygrometers in there. And in the summertime, it's gotten up to 100 degrees, actually over 100 at times. And in the winter, it gets down very cold. It's going down in the 40s. So we have documents in there that are 250 plus years old, and they're cooking. And the one thing you want to do with these old documents is to have items in a temperature controlled environment. And we've tried everything under the sun, and it just can't be done in that space. So this is the cost to go to Iron Mountain. There's an alternative to this, and I've asked for consideration of this. In losing the cell tower out front in the flagpole, a small room will be available in the basement. It's pretty much under where the copy machine is in the front of the room. It's about the size, about smaller than Brian Ballantyne's office, and that has network equipment that AT&T used. When they pulled that equipment out of there, I have asked that if I could use that room and make that room environmentally friendly, I could move all of my gear downstairs there, and then I wouldn't have to spend this money outside. To do this, to make that room work for us, cost is less than $1,000. It's short money, maybe $1,500 at most. So if I can, I've been told that nobody is opposed to this, but somebody not being opposed to it versus allowing us to do it are two different animals altogether. So that's the big stuff on our budget for this year. It's just kind of it's a nice quiet year for us coming up here. The only election we're going to have in this next fiscal year is going to be the town election. And then look out next year, the year after that. I just read on a news site yesterday that the Secretary of State will propose legislation next month to make it mandatory for all state elections, a 7-day, including weekend in-person early voting, as well as vote by mail, and 2 weeks in person and weekends for state elections. In addition to that, they want to have same-day voter registration. How all this is going to play out is beyond me. And just to think to try to drive this out to 351 cities and towns and all the different polling places, it's going to be bizarre, but that'll be an issue for the next fiscal year. On the plus side, I've been able to get many grants to offset the extra costs that we had. The state reimbursed us for the cost of that ballot drop box we had outside. They paid most of the cost of the camera outside. I just got an extra, I think $2,100 back today to cover some of the early voting extra labor costs. And I received a $5,000 grant from an organization to offset unanticipated costs for our election as well. So budget-wise, I'm going to be in pretty good shape. For this,
for year 21, you're talking about these are things that won't get spent.
No, I'm saying right now, this year for 21, right? And anticipating we're going to have an outdoor town meeting, my budget included money for an indoor town meeting. So I've already spoke to Carla, and by the way, she's taken out all the COVID money, all the CARES Act stuff she had already. We've gone through that very clearly. So the extra costs that we will incur to have a town meeting outdoors, if that comes to fruition this spring, that would be picked up under the CARES Act as well. So we're in pretty good shape. Initially in this budget, oh, and one more thing on this, because early voting expenses this year were an unfunded state mandate, I've got to be really careful how we do this and to ensure we're getting the right, asking the right people the right reimbursements. As has happened in past years, the state treasurer will, the state auditor will put legislation in to declare the early voting an unfunded mandate. And then they will seek reimbursement for us for the costs that we incurred in early voting. So that will come back to us next fiscal year. So it'll come against the into free cash next year. So there's just a lot of moving parts on the money end of it. But for this fiscal year, I think I'm in pretty good shape right now. So that's
Okay.
about it. I'm looking forward to a calm year.
So I've got the ClearGov budget on the screen. Does everybody see it? Andrew P, can you see it?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
so his budget year over year is proposed to go down 13.39%.
Kathy,
Yes?
just technically, nope, that looks like the same number. Okay, yeah, that matches up. 155475. Okay.
155475. Yep. So Brian moved pretty fast. Okay, yeah, it matches up fine, and it's down 13%. Sounds like it's going to go back up next year. So Jim, as far as the town meeting, let's assume it's outside for a moment. I assume maybe this time that no one is going to propose a truncated town meeting like last time. And if that's the case, then are you going to plan on just doing it 2 different days up front?
There's been no discussion on that at all. I haven't heard any discussion. And honestly, when I look at the number of articles that are on here and some of the ones that'll be very, will draw a lot of attention. For example, the EDC articles and the downtown issues. I think I'd be hard pressed to think that people would agree to let those pass to another time, unless the sponsors, the selectmen or the planning decided to pass on those. I think this is going to be a long day. I think this could easily run into 2 days.
See, I think so too. So maybe my thinking is you ought to maybe plan on it being
Yep.
2 days up front.
Yep.
So that people kind of know what they're going to do.
Yep. And I've, well, that honestly, that's entirely the selectmen's call, how they put that together. That being said and done, kind of in anticipation for this, I've already lined up all the vendors from last year to have them, they're ready to go. If we decide to do this in May or June, we're good to go. We'll just basically duplicate what we did last year, but add more space, because I suspect that this will be if the weather's decent, it'll be a more well-attended meeting. One thing that we are looking at to do for this fiscal year, and I don't know yet. I've asked the Secretary of State's office some guidance on this. Typically, our town election would be held on a Tuesday in May. My concern about holding it on a Tuesday in May with the trot of your school is that if we held it in the gymnasium, we would have people interacting with the staff and the special needs children and the other students in the school. So I want to look again, this will end up being a selectman's decision, but I want to look at the options to see that do we have the option to change the date to a Saturday, which would ensure that we don't interact with the schools at all. But in addition, if we did it on a Saturday, we could do it as we did last year for the people who want to vote versus absentee. They could come in the front door and go through the band room and go out that way, a much safer way to do it. So that's something I'm waiting some guidance from the Secretary of State's office, and then I'll present that to the selectmen down the road to see if we could do that. It just, to me, would be a lot, logistically, a lot easier for the schools and make it a safer place, safer environment.
Alrighty. Does anyone have any question on his budget? Andrew D?
I do not have any questions on this budget.
Judy?
What happened to the animal control other supplies? Maybe I missed that, but
Well, no, actually, thank you. You caused me to say 2 things here. We frankly just didn't need to spend any money this year. That's we had $200 in the budget last year. We don't have to spend any this year. Frankly, I think it's kind of silly for us to have a separate line item for something that's only a couple $100 a year. But that's just the way it's set up with the coding with the town accountant. I'm going to talk to her next year, see if we can't just eliminate that. We have enough dog tags to last us for a few years, so we don't need it. It's as simple as that. But I do want to mention one thing. It's minor in the scheme of things, but one of the things that we've been able to whittle away at is to reduce the costs for this printing of the street census and the street listing, so to speak, what people often refer to as the nosy book. And I've eliminated funding for that here. We're required by a state statute to make a listing of the residents available to the people. But I've received some information that if we simply make that available on the town website, we no longer have to spend the money for that. And last year we spent $800 on it, and it's just a silly thing. We, as a tradition in Southborough, haven't charged any money for it. I think Westborough charges $15 a piece, and frankly, we've only had 3 or 4 people asked for it this year, and I think I sent to every committee this year. I sent it out in a PDF version. So we'll just make it available on the web, and it's an end of a tradition. But honestly, it's money we can save.
Is that it, Judy?
I think it'd be nice to print it and I'd buy it. I found it very useful.
Let me ask you, as a resident, if our cost comes out to about $5 a copy to print, you think it's reasonable to charge the $5 for that?
I think you could charge more. I think it's once people use it, they see how nice it is to have that.
In a hard copy
Anyway.
versus online. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'll look into that, but I'd have to get the selectmen to agree to charge a fee to cover that then, and we can make it work.
Advisory is pushing selectmen to up the fees where we can. Just so you know, we wrote them a letter and asked them to do a study of all fees to make sure that they're competitive and fair market value. So we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, I saw that on Monday. One of the things that we were planning to do anyway is to recommended the selectmen that they raise the fee that we collect for fuel permits. I think it was $10 per permit, which doesn't make, it's lunacy. Each one takes an hour and a half to process. And, if an entity has 5 tanks, they're paying $10 for all this ridiculous stuff. So we'll push that along a little bit.
Good. Judy, anything else?
No.
Andrew P?
Yeah, I think the only one I was looking at is for the Iron Mountain.
Yes.
Would it be possible to add, if we go that route, digital imaging? I know they have that service. I just think maybe that might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, they do. But these are documents that are 250 years old. Frankly, many of them are actually handwritten, and we don't need that. Some of the records we will be putting over there, we have already scanned. It's something we've been doing on the side. We have time has allowed us the past couple of years. We've gone back for almost 100 years for all the births, deaths, and marriages, as well as town meeting and the minutes and the warrants, to make digital copies of all those and make those all searchable. And we're a whisker away from having that available on the web. And the driving force, Andrew, beyond that, to be honest with you, was I had to manually by hand go back through 100 years worth of town meeting notes twice to prove that something didn't happen. And I said, I'm never doing that again. So so we're in good shape for that. But this is primarily stuff that just you can't scan, and it's by its nature, it's very it's pretty unique.
Yeah, I was thinking more on the 250-year-old stuff that eventually it's just not going to be around, right?
I beg your pardon. There's 2 pieces of this. One is that we already have a lot of this. We already have it on microfilm, and we converted a lot of it to PDFs. But you bring up an interesting point. One of the things we have a request into a company up in a nonprofit up in Andover that deals with they're truly artisans dealing with preservation and restoration of documents, to see if in fact some of these documents that are 250 years old where the ink is faded. I'm told with like infrared photography, you can actually sometimes bring this stuff back to see if there is a way for us to restore these records, which would be a nice thing to do. And as a part of that process, if we did, I would have them photograph them and make those available.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Andrew D?
Just following this discussion, one thing I thought of is for some of this kind of longer term historical archiving, is there the possibility of getting kind of grant money from like a Massachusetts Historical Association or something like that?
No, not that I'm aware of. And I've talked to a lady who's the coordinator for those activities with the state. There are grant things, not for a physical perspective. There are grants available for various things dealing with the assets themselves, along the lines of things that Andrew talked about, but nothing to build a vault or to do a physical item like that. Nothing I'm aware of.
But there is grant money to possibly digitize it.
Yeah, in some cases, some there are. Yeah.
And Andrew, I think we've used CPA funds in the past for some historical documentation, imaging for Historical Society, I think, in the past too.
Yes.
Good statement. Andrew P, did you finish your questions?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay. Mr. Rooney?
No questions, Jim. Thank you. You look good to see you. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So Jim, I've only got one just clarification. So as far as your staff goes,
Right.
Amy Berry is the assistant town clerk. She's full-time.
Yes.
And then where are you with your assistant hour-wise?
That position is 19 and a half hours. Last year, I dropped it from 23 to 19 and a half, and it remains at 19 and a half.
Okay, and who is that person now?
Her name is Renee Chen.
Okay. Because, we haven't been there a year, so it's hard to keep up with people.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, the two of them are spectacular. Just incredibly fortunate to work with both of them. Very, very, very competent, professional, good people to work with.
I can definitely say that's true for Amy. I haven't met Renee yet, but Amy's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's turn to the articles that Jim is either sponsoring or has probably made sure to get in here. So let's start with 27.
Okay.
So Jim, I think yours are 27, 28, and 29.
Yes.
Kathy, for 1 second on Jim's budget, not to go back to it, but Jim, is there anything we had asked a lot of the different committees is what could you do if money wasn't an issue? Is there anything you're leaving off here? Because we didn't really get the write-up, Kathy, right? The usual one. So is there anything kind of?
Yeah, no. Well, one of the things that shot us in the foot here this year is that position that Renee has used to be 38 hours. And I dropped it 4 years ago to 23 and a half, and then I dropped it again. And one of the ways that we had counted that was bringing in 3 seniors to do work for us. And that's what took the sting out of it. We lost that this past year. And then in addition, we had an extra terminal from the state put in to allow us to have seniors work on it. And that was in a room that has now been taken over full-time by the treasurer's office. So we've lost some of our abilities to wiggle on these things. We're in good shape. We're in excellent shape in terms of equipment. We have new voting equipment. We have new poll pads. Those devices that you put your ballots in cost $5,800 a piece. We have 3 precincts and a spare, and I was able to buy 2 more of them for $100 a piece, which is kind of a bizarre situation. But I said for $100 a piece, I'm taking them. And so we're in very good shape. And my objective, my hope is that we'll be able to end up in a situation where once COVID is over, when you line up in the 3 precincts in the trot of your school, that you'll have dual check-ins, 2 check-ins per precinct talking to one another, and 2 checkouts per precinct. So your throughput will be twice the speed. And, so we're in pretty good shape. I wish we had flexibility to bring some competent people in to help us with some of the projects. And, but frankly, knowing the overall budget situation right here, I can't even ask you for that. So, if we get in a better shape in a couple of years, terrific. But I can't in good conscience ask you for something like that. No.
Great, thanks. Sorry,
All right,
Kathy.
so let's turn to Article 27. So Jim,
Okay.
this is the one where the number of days to be appointed, et cetera, is going to be proposed to be increased from 15 to 30 days.
Right. That basically was driving the selectmen nuts that people wouldn't get sworn in and they'd show back up again and again. I think I'm perfectly fine with going to 30 days on it. I think it's reasonable. And, we've gone way above board to try to help people swear them in. I'm going to not throw one person under the bus, but one person who was needed to be sworn in a hurry was only going to be in Southborough for one day. And I met him in the parking lot of a liquor store to swear him in. So it all worked out, but I'm perfectly fine with that. It won't affect us in any way.
Full service. Anyone have any questions on this one? This is 27 and it literally just changes the 15 to 30. Okay.
Okay.
All right. We'll vote on them all at one time.
Sure.
Let's keep going. So 28.
So I have a question for you on 28 because I asked Mark for a copy of the draft of the warrant yesterday, and it only had 1 sentence for 28. Is that what you have?
Yep.
Okay. No, that's not correct. What 28 is looking to do, there's 2 parts to it. One is that there's conflicts between 2 different parts of the town code about publishing town meeting notices, and this just tries to bring them both in sync. A few years ago, we stopped having to post meetings of the town notice on every 3rd tree in town and, just all over the crazy place. And frankly, we should have fixed this one as well. So that's the first part of it. The second piece of it allows the town meeting to be held in any town contiguous to Southborough. Unless we have this stated in the bylaws, we can't do that unless there's a special act. So, this is just the second piece of this paragraph B would allow them, for example, say Algonquin, let's say we had a flood or a fire or something at Trotter. There's no other place in town to hold a meeting. This would enable us to hold it in the high school, kind of a deal. So and it's just very straightforward. But anyway, the gist of it is you're going to have to see the rest of this detail from Mark to vote on it. It's just, boilerplate stuff just to make things easier for us all down the road.
I agree. So we're not going to vote on that one tonight because we don't know what we're voting on.
Exactly.
All right. So it sounds like that one will be okay though once we see the language. So you're okay with that one? You support what it intends to do once they get it flushed out?
28. Yeah, I wrote it up.
Okay. All right.
I'm the author of that one. Yeah.
Okay. 29 is you two, and that is.
Can I actually ask? I'm sorry, Kathy, just to ask a question about the 15 to 30 day swearing in requirement.
Yep.
Is it kind of, will you say it's fair that that's really for some of the more committees and boards that meet less frequently? Because it still is the case, right? You need to be sworn in to sit on the committee and take a vote, right? So if you just got appointed to a committee and there was a meeting next week, you still got to get sworn in to participate next week, right?
Oh, I was afraid you were going to drive me down this rabbit hole. No. The short answer is no. And this drove me bananas as to why we were swearing people in. I mean, poor Bonnie Fan, if her right hand's got to be about 3 inches longer than her left with all the time she's been sworn into things. We were swearing people into subcommittees and this and that. And I asked the all-important question, why are we doing this? I was an FBI agent for just under 30 years. I was sworn in one time and it worked for 30 years. And I called all kinds of towns and found out the different stuff. And I did some research on this. And the gist of it is, state statute says that an official of the town has to be qualified before they can hold the office. All right. Well, what does that mean? What is an official of the town? Where is that defined? And it comes back to I'm happy to send you the site on this, but it comes back to a court case in Massachusetts in over 100 years, I think 104 years ago, I think it was, maybe a little more than that, where they actually defined what constitutes an official of the town. And the gist of it is somebody who acts with the authority of the town. So in my discretion as the clerk, I determined that there are very few people in Southborough that actually act with the authority of the town. The Trails Committee doesn't act with the authority of the town. Recreation doesn't. So all elected officials certainly, but then when you look beyond that, it comes down to historical, Concom, ZBA.
Planning board.
Planning board's elected.
Okay, you're right.
So they'd be picked up there. Beyond that, but then you have other individual people. You have like the building inspector, the police chief, the fire chief, the treasurer, those officials. But yeah, so for the vast majority of the boards that we had traditionally brought them to swear them in, we don't do it anymore. We just stopped at the spring, and I notify the selectmen and the rest of it. It was one of these things that Southborough did and most towns did, frankly, because they always did it, but nobody did the research to figure out legally what you're required to do.
Okay.
Well, I'm confused. Who are you saying now still has to be sworn in?
Advisory would not, because you don't have the authority you don't act with the authority of the town. You make recommendations. All right.
So it would only be the few people who aren't elected who do act with authority of the town.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So this is in that. This is going to be in this too.
No. That's strictly my discretion as the clerk to say you're not an official of the town. You don't have to be sworn in.
Yeah.
So all elected officials get sworn in the day they come forward. And this was the selectmen wanted to do this last year. And it was this past fall when I did the homework on this and brought this to ground to see what's really involved here. So the people that have to be sworn in, you'd have historical, you'd have Concom, you'd have ZBA, and I'm pretty sure, I think that's just the three of those.
Well, that's definitely making things more efficient.
Yeah, and another thing, another piece of this as well. Once you're sworn in because of your elected or appointed position, and then you are then a representative of that board or committee to something else, you don't have to be sworn in again. You're acting with the authority of your first position. And it's, it's just, again, that was one of these waste of everyone's time kind of activities that we did.
Good.
So.
Good. Okay, so 29 is Saturday. Go ahead, Andrew.
So really the 15 to 30 day extension is for the more, for lack of a better term, more adjudicatory, the people who are officials.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Only elected or appointed officials. But everyone who's elected, I swear them in that day. I'll get them. It's the day they sworn in, take care of them right away. So. You know, one of the things that drove people nuts on this, you have positions that Southborough has, like, for whatever reason, we still appoint a field driver. All right. And every year that person would have to be 2 or 3 times on the agenda because they wouldn't come in and get sworn in. You know, so there's a lot of, that was just an irritating thing for the selectmen. And I understand it, but it should, this whole problem should go away anyway. So.
All right. Andrew D., are you done with that one?
Yes.
All right, so 29, Jim, is Saturday hours.
Right. It just basically says if a deadline to allow people to register to vote falls on a Saturday, we had to staff the office and pay the overtime to cover that on a Saturday if we had somebody there in overtime. Generally, it was me. This provision just says if the deadline falls on a Saturday, it pushes to the following Monday. So the voter doesn't lose it and they actually gain a day, and it just makes it, you know, easier. In the 5.5, almost 6 years I've been the town clerk, I've probably been here a dozen times maybe on a Saturday for this, and I've yet to have anybody come in to register on a Saturday. So it's, you know, just a kind of a common sense thing.
Any questions on this one? So I'm looking at Andrew D., I'm looking at Judy, I'm looking at Andrew P., and Mr. Rooney. No one's saying anything.
Jim, what are you going to do when somebody goes there on Saturday and you're not open? I mean, that's going to happen.
We'll have a sign up on that the deadline's been extended until Monday. But the other piece of this, frankly, you can register to vote online now.
Yeah, I guess that really takes care of it.
Yeah.
So you're okay, Judy?
Yep.
All right. All right. Any other questions on this one? This one's, I think, fairly cut and dry too. All right. Any other questions for Jim before he goes back to whatever he was doing? So Jim, we're glad to see you back, truly.
Thank you.
That was terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Okay, so we're going to vote on 27, 29 tonight, unless someone disagrees with that. We're going to hold 28. Okay. All right, so Jim, you're welcome to stay and listen to the vote, or you can do whatever you want to do.
I might just get my fix of advisory tonight and just, you know, go back to the.
Yep, well, that's what Sam said too. I felt like he was coming back home again. Okay,
Yeah.
so Andrew D., you want to make both motions?
Yeah, before, so, and then the reason why we're not voting on 28 is the most
no
recent version of the
There's no
draft.
words there. We don't
It's
know what
not
we're
actually-
really voting on. He could change
So
it.
I
to
agree with
something.
not voting on
He
that.
could put something pretty horrible in there, and we voted for it. So yeah, we better not vote on something we haven't seen yet.
I move that the advisory committee support at town meeting Articles 27 and 29 in the draft warrant.
Second,
Second.
I second.
any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Judy,
Okay. Bud's eye.
Cook, aye. Mr. Dennington?
Hi.
Tim apparently has dropped off completely.
I'm still here.
Oh, well, I can't see you. Okay, I wonder where you are. Sorry, Tim. I can't see you. That's why. So, Tim, did you have any questions for?
No,
for
I'm good.
Sorry, Tim. Okay, Tim.
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Rooney,
All right.
Mr. Pfaff.
Aye.
Okay, so 6-0, Claire, on both of those, 27 and 29. All right, thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Good night, folks.
Good night.
Good night.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Jim.
Thank you. Bye.
So one quick thing before we, I get rid of his budget here. So we looked at the town clerk budget. He also, there's a separate budget for elected town clerk, which is just Jim. And the proposal there is just to raise it by the SAP COLA increase of 2.8%. So that's all that budget is. So there wasn't much to say about that one.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. All right, so I'm gonna stop the share on that one, come back. Oops. Okay. All right, I want to vote on 4 other really easy articles and get those out of the way so we feel like we have accomplished quite a bit tonight. So these are the first 4, and I am going to just read these really quickly because these are ones that are always here. They're just perfunctory and administrative, so there's not a whole lot to talk about, but we can get those 4 out of the way to feel like we're on the way here. Okay, so the first one is to hear reports from the various town officers and committees, et cetera, like advisory at town meeting. The second one is to authorize a town to say yes to any donations from any of the not-for-profits. The third one is to allow the treasurer to borrow short-term if there's a mismatch with revenue and expenses. And the fourth one is to authorize the Board of Selectmen or schools to sign a contract for more than 3 years if it is advantageous to do so. They've got the authority already to do 3 years. But if there's something that comes up that looks like would save some money to do more than 3, they've got the authority to do that. So that's the first 4. Does anyone have any issues with voting on those 4 in one package? Okay, seeing none. Andrew, you want to make a motion, Andrew D, for the 4 of them? So it's 1 through 4 too, those are the numbers.
Hold on, let me, 1 through 4.
Mhm.
I move that the advisory committee support at town meeting articles 1 through 4 of the draft warrant.
Second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, I believe that was Andrew first. Andrew P.
You can
Any
have
further
it.
discussion?
Can I ask a question?
Of course, Tim.
This would be to our town clerk. Was there any further discussion about, from the sense of moving things along at town meeting to eliminate Article 1?
I think he's gone, Tim. I know
Yeah.
his face is still there, but I think he's gone.
So that was one of the things that the town meeting review committee had discussed, and he's not here, so I'll get with him offline on that.
But I think I can answer it. Those 4 will be part of the consent agenda we started 2 town meetings ago. So we did it at ATM 19 and we did it at ATM 20. So those 4 will clearly be part of the consent agenda where they're asking for a vote for many articles in one fell swoop.
To hear the reports of the various town officers. That will be dealt with separately.
It was included last year because we basically did away with it because of COVID and the short meeting. So you're right, maybe that one won't be, but I am very confident that the other 3 are part of that consent agenda.
Yeah, and this is really specifically Article 1, where the town meeting voters are subjected to 30 to 60 minutes of blah, 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 blah. All the information is available online. It's available in documents. And I just don't know that it is a way to pull more voters into town meeting to make them miserable.
Well, it's the only time advisory has to make their report to town meeting, and we are their eyes and ears in their committee. So I
mean,
would hate for advisory not to be able to do their report.
and there's something to be said for advisory being a town moderator appointed committee should have the opportunity to make a report to town meeting, but it's just abused. So I know this is something that was discussed in the past. And I don't know if our town clerk has decided to do anything with it or if our town moderator is going to do anything with it. But, I mean, we were spared it last time because of COVID. And I would hate to see it come back.
Yeah, I wonder, Tim, what about a time limit? No more than, say, 5 minutes, which at least will eliminate those who tend to go on and on and on.
Yeah, that's something that only the town moderator
Right.
could implement, I
Yep.
believe.
Right.
So Jim is back. So Jim, have you heard most of this?
Yes, I have. A couple of thoughts. Understand that there are some parts of the town code that require a group to make a report at town meeting. For example, there's a bylaw on your warrant this year that has language that would require that group to make a report at town meeting as well. Whether
Which group is that? Do you know?
it's the group that's replacing the Americans with Disability Act. I forget the name of it. It's I think a 4 term. Anyway, but there are the MTC committee that bylaw a couple of years ago required them to make a report at town meeting. Now, I think all this comes under the discretion of the moderator. The moderator, the bylaw actually allows people to speak only twice on an article. But the moderator has great discretion on that. One thing that I have suggested, I've gone to a number of other towns, I think 8 other towns to see their town meetings, how they run. Westwood does an interesting thing where all the presentations and so forth are done before the town meeting begins. So, people come in at 6 o'clock and they have an hour worth of reports and presentations and all the rest of it. The gavel goes down and they're off to the races, and they get everything done in one night. And I think there's a lot, I like that personally myself.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah. For the people that want to get, that need that want that. And for the folks that, let's call them the frequent flyers that have to have a presentation for every article when it really doesn't need it. They kind of shoehorn into that. So, but all this is entirely within the discretion of the moderator.
So when you say make a presentation at town meeting, they're required to see our MTC and this new SPAC. Does it have to be oral? Can it be written?
No, the bylaws say we'll make a report. It doesn't say.
Why can't that include a written report?
There you go. And that all gets down to the discretion of the moderator. For example, the moderator has, in the past few years, has given people the opportunity to make PowerPoint presentations and come up and stand on the stage and do that. Some towns don't do that at all. This is entirely up to the discretion of the moderator.
Interesting.
So,
Right.
but
Okay,
to your point earlier, I think this is going to be a long one.
Yeah, we do too. So my guess is this is the kind of thing that is going to have to get cut down. Okay, anything else, Tim?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jim, for coming back.
You're welcome. Bye now.
All right, bye-bye. Okay, so did we vote on this? I'm sorry. Did we vote for 1 through 4?
No.
Okay, I don't think we did either. I think we started talking. Okay, so Andrew, we just do the motion again, so we'll be sure. You did do the motion though, so.
I think I did make a motion, yeah.
All right, and I think Andrew Pfaff seconded, and then we started talking. Okay, because Tim brought up the Article 1. So Tim, this was your fault. Okay, so roll call vote to approve Articles 1 through 4. Judy?
Are we doing them all at once?
Yes.
Okay, I vote aye.
Cook, aye. Mr. Dennington?
Aye.
Mr. Martell?
Aye.
Mr. Pfaff?
Aye.
Mr. Rooney?
I,
6-0. Okay, so we got a few other ways, so we're making progress. Let's see. All right, so let's do a budget update real quick. It's coming down slowly but surely. So right now, the Brian Ballantyne version of the proposed budget is showing a proposed or an estimated year-over-year increase of 7.11%. So a couple things that have happened to bring it down a little bit. Jim's budget, that helped. But the Capital Planning Committee met on Monday and have recommended reducing some of the previous recommended capital expenditures for fiscal year 22. So that's one of the reasons it's come down. And there's been a couple other slight things. So we're going at least in the right ways. It's going down really, really slow. So 7.11 right now is what he's got. He's been very conservative with some things. I've got a different one where I've taken off some more things than he has, but we're at least headed in the right direction. At least tonight we are. So anybody have any questions about the budget at this point? All righty. Let me just add one more thing there. I have another note. One thing that I thought was going to come out that right now, when it comes to us, we'll probably still be in, and this will probably make Judy happy, is the library, the work for the library, painting and carpet. So Ryan Donovan called me and said, just so you know, I'm happy if that comes out. It's $115,000. He said, I'm happy if it comes out. I'm a little worn out with all the work that's been done on the facade, et cetera. No one's been in the library almost the whole past year, so it hadn't had a lot more wear and tear. So I'm okay, just so you know. John Parent also said the same thing. And then the library board said differently. So they came to capital planning on Monday and as a group requested that it not be moved to next year. And then once they told us that carpet is 32 years old, capital planning did not take it off fiscal year 22 capital plan. So it's there right now. So when we see the capital plan, it's probably going to be there. But yes, a 32-year-old carpet. It's so old that the cleaning company refuses to clean it because they think it's going to probably shred it or something. So literally we can't even hire a company to come clean it because it's so old. So anyway, we will see. All right, so I added a topic real quick after I talked to Claire about this yesterday. It seems like most people are aware of this. I wasn't until I talked to her. Board Select would know about it. I believe Brian and Mark know about it. But the state, with, I think under Karen Polito's jurisdiction, has put together a website that is trying to make it easier for towns, et cetera, to find grants and not have to go all over the place. So there's 10 different departments that have kind of pulled everything into one website or one portal that you can go to hopefully make it easier and less time consuming to try to find grants. They're providing resources to help people too get those grants. So hopefully this will allow us to find more grants. But I brought this up because of the following. Mr. Stivers has for a long time tried to encourage the Board of Selectmen to add a position in town for a grant writer. So that's what their focus is, and not expect every department to come up with their own grants. As we know, we missed a couple of grants the last year that we probably would have gotten pretty easily if we had known about them, but we didn't. By the time we knew about them, the time had passed. So Board of Selectmen have voted to do this. They voted to add a grant writer position. Mark Purple has been asked by Marty Healy to find money in the current year budget, fiscal year 21, to add that position. So far, I don't think a lot's been done about it. And now with this new website, which just launched like January 21st, there may be a even better reason to get this person on board. Again, it's not our place to do that. They've got, Board of Selectmen has got to see this through. But I'm not sure Mark has a place to find the money. He's thinking it's $25,000 or so. It's not like we got budget sitting there with a whole lot of fat that you know about at this point. So he doesn't, I don't think he's got a really good idea of where to go as far as this goes. So my question to the advisory committee is, do we want to basically let them know that we would be receptive to basically making a reserve fund transfer for the cost of this position? They're talking about making a contract. So it's not going to be an employee to test it out, to see how it works. So it's not something we are taking adding to the budget permanently. So I just want to see what you guys thought about letting them know advisory might be receptive to funding the position if they can't find another place to put it. So I'll go around the room. Andrew D.
So this does not seem to fit within the traditional typical criteria of a reserve fund transfer, right? Like an unanticipated expense that happened after a budget was sent. It's really something that really can be planned for. And one thing that I think we should consider is this has been such an unusual year. We have devoted, I can't keep track of the number, but we've said we're going to vote favorably on 2 reserve fund transfers for the Board of Health for contracted services if they're not reimbursed by CARES
We've
Act.
got we got 3 things on that list. Those 2, then we've got Chief Achilles antenna.
Okay. The Chief Achilles one, that was clearly like a traditional.
It was an emergency.
Right. And we have tried to encourage departments to really follow.
We have.
Yeah. So this,
I agree.
I think there's a good case on the merits for the idea that Sam had. And I think the idea of starting it as a contracted position to see if it, the grants that the grant writer gets cover the cost of the contract, but doing it through a reserve fund transfer, I have some, it's maybe a little too creative, I think, for me from a budget standpoint.
All right, good enough. Judy?
How much are you talking about? How much do you think we would spend on this grant writer?
The number they got thrown to me was 25,000
It's
for
not
the
very
rest of
much.
this fiscal year.
I think there's a lot of grant writers floating around who would probably be happy to have a little gig for less money.
See, I agree in part, Judy, with that, because, you know, colleges, kids that are in grad school take a grant writing course. Northeastern may actually have some type of program that you're being qualified as a grant writer. So you could do an internship, you know, you could actually
Exactly.
offer a Northeastern student. So I do believe there's probably ways to find people that need credit for what they're working on to do it. So I do believe I agree that they should at least pursue that. Okay, so you don't like the idea of reserve fund.
You
I just
know,
want to throw it out there and make sure.
if the committee wants, I wouldn't oppose it.
Okay, so I'm going to call you agnostic for the moment.
Okay, good.
Okay, back to Andrew D.
I'm sorry to go back, but
It's okay.
you know, another thing is the last meeting we were talking about these. There seemed to be a consensus that all the different revolving funds in the different departments should go back into more like a centralized budget process, right?
Let's go back into the general fund, right?
I
Yes,
can't
we did.
articulate exactly, but there seems to be a little bit of tension between doing that, which is like a more, you know, regimented approach to this, and, you know, approving this as a reserve fund transfer.
Andrew P. Any?
I think for this year, I would be less inclined for a position and more inclined for consulting. I mean, I think when we were looking at the FEMA one, I found a company that you just pay them. If it's a vehicle grant, it's $1,000. If it's a equipment grant, it's $800, and they'll write it for you. So more an ad hoc by grant versus just having a body and then doing something with it.
So that's a company that writes grants as far as their business goes.
Correct. But they charge you on a per grant basis, not like this would be more of a almost like a staffer, right? That would just write grants. I think it's a trial or a pilot. I think it would be more apropos for a reserve fund transfer to say, okay, let's spend, do 2 grants and spend, I don't know, $2,000 or $2,500 and see how they do. And then go from there. I think the grant discussion in general probably needs more fleshing out. Other towns have grant writing committees. And, I would say either a grant writing committee or have it under advisory and have a pool of funds for grant matching and let that kind of foster itself. But I think for this year, I would be more inclined of specific cost per grant versus just a staffer.
So that's interesting. We should make sure that they know about that as an alternative to contracting with a specific person, because you know what your cost is, and they probably, it sounds like they got specialties with each group. Each group knows how to go get their particular type of grant.
Like I know Lynn Spencer that does a lot of the historical stuff. If we need an MHC grant from Mass Historical, that would be who you go for that. And certain people specialize in FEMA, and certain people specialize in, different EPA grants. And I think it would be tough to find one person to fit that bill. But I think, if there's certain grants we want to go after, I would certainly think it's a good idea to pay somebody who's got the expertise to do it.
But you're not proposing using the reserve fund to make those payments.
I would be okay with it.
All right. Okay, so we've got one against, one agnostic, one that would be for that specific way to do it.
But not necessarily 25,000. I think
Right.
I think that would be a lot of grants. I would need to see a lot of grants applied for that much money.
So the 2 adjectives that should apply to reserve, it's either unanticipated or an emergency. So we'd have to fit this into, it's certainly not an emergency. So we would have to fit it into the unanticipated category. Mr. Mooney?
Yeah, I don't think it fits into either of those categories. I'm not in favor of it going into the route of a reserve fund transfer. And in terms of the overall objective, I'd also want to know what the landscape is out there in terms of what type of grants are we looking at and what's the possible the best case scenario in terms of amount of money that would be coming back to the town.
And to be clear, this is a unique year, right? We've never had a year like this. So who knows where we're going to end up at the end of the year as far as being surprised about reserve fund transfers. We always have some. We never know what they are to the end of the year. You know, we were having an easy winter, which has changed, you know, in a matter of 2 weeks. So don't be surprised if Karen's going to be way over her budget for snow removal. We know we've got 60,000 potentially already. So I do think we should keep that in mind. We don't want to overextend the reserve funds so there's nothing left for when we really do need it.
And Kathy, I just don't see this request as fitting into the overall objective and purpose of the, you know, reserve fund that you mentioned, the two items, and I think Andrew D explained it or espoused his position, which is the same as mine. I just don't see how you get it into that category.
Okay. Tim?
I agree with John and Andrew.
Okay. All right, so I don't see any reason to take a vote on this. I just wanted to kind of poll everybody to see if you had any interest in offering the reserve fund to get this thing going. But Andrew, Pfaff, I think we really do need to let them know about this company to know that there's more than one way to do it. And Judy, if you know any, you know, programs, I just know my daughter, as part of her grad program, she had to learn how to write grants. So there's probably a lot of grad students that know how to write grants and maybe would get course credit if they actually did it.
And Kathy, I think Lisa has her hand up. Lisa, do you want us to bring you in? Do you want to bring her over?
Yeah. Miss Braccio. Hey, Lisa.
Good evening. How are you all?
We're fine.
Thank you for bringing me over. I just, I appreciate the discussion you guys are having on the grant writer. The board didn't make any decisions on that. I mean, we generally discussed how we were going to do it, if we could do it, and how we would fund it. So I just wanted to be clear. A vote wasn't taken of the board that we supported this position. I think we all supported exploring how or if we could do that. So I just wanted to put that out there, Kathy.
Well, I'm glad you clarified, because it was my understanding that it was a little bit more firm that you actually did support, and Mark had been charged with finding the money.
Well, so the board was willing to explore. I don't think, again, I can only speak for me. I mean, at this time, I wasn't willing to pay $25,000. I don't think it's the right fiscal time to do it. But if we could find a way to do it, then, you know, I would certainly be more interested in hearing about it. And I think there was another member of the board that may have felt the same way, but we didn't take a strong stance on it other than to see if there was an opportunity somewhere to be able to do this that didn't affect the tax base.
Lisa, did you hear what Andrew Pfaff said a minute ago about another way to do this? There's a company that has groups that specialize in equipment grants and FEMA grants and whatever.
Yeah, I would certainly be interested, Andrew, in hearing more about that. Absolutely. You know, to find a way. And I appreciate you mentioning the one-stop portal as well, Kathy. We had talked about that, and I think it was our last meeting, just after the lieutenant governor, you know, had the meeting on it. And I think there's tremendous opportunities there as well.
It sounds like it. It sounds like, I mean, it looked very interesting. Looks like they spent, well, I'm not going to be catty here. Anyway, so thank you, Lisa. But the one thing we did do tonight is let everybody know that we will not vote for the reserve fund to be used for this. So that's not going to help get it done either. So, but we know now.
Well, thank you, Kathy. And Andrew, I would be interested if you have some time to talk offline and get some more information on what you had suggested as well.
Sure, no worries. I can send over research I did.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, so we're going to get done very early tonight, guys. Hooray, hooray, hooray. We'll go back to the minutes in a second. The last thing to discuss tonight, two more things. So remember there's a capital planning committee, then there's a subcommittee that's working on the issue of whether we can close the school or not, or whether we should close the school. And the NASDAQ group in Marlboro were hired to basically do a demographic study that projected the school population for the next 10 years, which we shared with you a couple weeks ago. The people on that committee knew that there were errors in the report. And so we went back to them and asked them to correct the errors. And they have now. So they've issued a revised report. So if you line up the two reports and you were trying to look at the decision as to whether we could close one of the 4 K-8 schools, if you look at the first report, you would be nervous about doing that. You would be very hesitant to do it because the numbers are starting, they projected the numbers to start going up pretty significantly between 2021 and 2031. Not quite what they were when we were at our peak in 2003, 4, and 5, but not far away. And then if you know Park Central may be coming and you know you always should hedge your bet a little bit, it would have made you pretty nervous to make the decision based on that initial report. If you now look at the report that's revised that we have, you could definitely make a different decision. So that's how different these two reports are. So I will circulate it to everyone so you can see it, but it is drastically different than the first report. The kids, the number of projected students is almost what it is now. It's still going down a little bit, so it's not going way up like the first report showed it was going to. So not much more to say about it tonight. That committee is meeting on Friday to talk about next steps, but you would be able to conclude most likely from the revised report that we've got the capacity, if we want to close one of the 4 K-8 schools. Okay, so one other, this is just FYI, it's not ready for prime time yet. So Andrew Pfaff and I have been talking to Brian and to Mark about the healthcare cost of the town, which we alluded to last week also. So that discussion is continuing. So there's nothing really to report, but we're hopeful that there may be something that can be done significantly that would also save significant money going forward, not just a one-time thing, not pushing it to next year, but truly restructure in a way that we actually could bring down the major portion of the cost of the benefits budget. There's more in it besides healthcare costs, but healthcare costs are by far the biggest cost of that. So TBD, nothing new to report. There's ongoing discussions as far as that goes. All right, so I think that's it. Let's do the minutes, and then I'll see if anybody else has anything to talk about, and I'll tell you what we're going to do for the next few meetings in the calendar. Okay, so Andrew, you want to take over for the 2 sets of minutes?
Sure. So starting with the January 28th minutes, so 2 things. One, I have a question about something where hopefully everyone can help fill in the gap. And the second was John Rooney got me some pretty minor comments. So in these minutes, on line 71 through 72. So this is after a slide that talks about that there is a K-8. There's a proposed budget increase of 3.13% level services. There's a line that says summary. The 3.13% increase for K-8 and Algonquin increase of 3.5% equals an 8% increase for an average household for schools. And I wrote AD question, correct? What is, I don't remember, 3.5 plus 3.13 doesn't equal 8. What was that?
Was that because of the funding that they were pulling out of to reduce the overall impact to the towns?
I think that's where the 8 came from, Tim, but that sentence is incorrect. So that last part should just be eliminated. That's not correct.
Just eliminate it together? Or
Yeah,
just strike it?
Do the 3. So right now, let's make sure we're right here. Because you just wouldn't add the 2 together and say that's the increase to the town. Okay, so 3.13 is right for K-8. And 3.5 is right for the assessment from regional for Southborough so far. It's not final yet, but that's at least what they said it was. That's what they got it down to when they showed it to us last week or 2 weeks ago. So I think you just stop with the, put a period after the 3.5.
Okay. And then I'll just review the comments that John Rooney had. Line 25, it originally said John Rooney wants to hear from departments who are concerned about their budget reductions after the selectman's request. He has proposed that instead say JR would like to hear from departments who may be concerned. Lines 122 through 126. Instead of JR asked about the district's initial ask of a 8.15% increase and asked, it just would say he asked about the school's initial asks of a 8.15% increase and asked whether there were items that didn't make it into the budget. Strike the last sentence on 125 through 126 about whether this exercise had happened in the past. Lines 127 through 131, other kind of minor changes like this. Do you want me to describe them in detail?
Well, I've got 131 and the first part of 132 should be struck because it's redundant. You say the
Yeah.
same thing said above.
Yeah, so 130 to 131, it's the proposed edit is JR asked about the historical expense related to funding for special education, period. Okay. And then 134, where it said JM really should be JR, asked about account number 9309, page 48, that has been identified as opposed to is. I don't think there were any other changes.
I had a question. It's very minor, but is it required that we add the time that I showed up?
Not that I know of. I know some people do it.
Okay, good. Thank
I
you.
used to go, I was part of the public safety committee, and it would irritate the fool of me when I would get there, at 30 seconds after 7, and they'd say, Kay Cook walked in late. So 30 seconds I don't consider late. So I'm sure there's no rule that says we got to put this in here.
Okay.
Kathy, I think so on the town's website.
Yep.
You click minutes and agendas. Before you even see them, Jim has a bullet point. These are the most basic things you need under state law, and I think it is one of them is a list of the members who are present. So while I don't know that you need the exact time, I think it is helpful to know. I think it's helpful for one of the meetings where I came a little late. It's a refresher of I wasn't part of this discussion. So,
Well, we have Jim. Jim, any feedback on whether or not we need the time?
So it's Tim's listed as being here. It's what Tim's question is, does it have to say I came at whatever?
what line is it at?
It's at the very top.
Oh, okay.
It's 5.
Do you remember when you came in? Or-
I mean, it was around 7.
So I don't know that Jim is still, I know we see his face, but it doesn't look to me like he's still
He's
here.
there. He just took himself off mute. Go ahead, Jim.
I'm still here.
Okay.
There is, to my knowledge, that's never been addressed by the AG's office, either in training or in any decisions that they've made.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I say it's never been addressed. That topic has never been addressed by the AG's office. So,
So as long as we say who's present, regardless of what time they got there, which is what we always start off with. And then when we vote, it's clear who voted. I think we're covered.
because you're doing
So
it by, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So just for the matter at hand, I mean, I don't know, do you just want to say, I mean, Tim was present, right? We just say list him as present instead of saying Casey stated that Tim Martell will be joining later.
Yeah, so I think you just put Tim Martell there. He came.
Okay.
I would agree with with Kathy on that.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so where it makes a difference, it's actually in the next set of minutes, because you guys had a vote on the first set of minutes, and then John Rooney joined midstream after the first vote on minutes. He joined, so essentially then it changed from 6-0 to 7-0 for the next vote. So that's one case where it makes a difference.
Okay, so I agree. So why don't you just, when that happens, make it clear that Mr. Rooney, when you do the 6-0 vote, say Mr. Rooney absent on that vote, or say something so we know who the 6 were, then who the 7 were. So obviously
Right.
7 were, right? So I agree. So just say 6-0, Mr. Rooney not there yet.
Just a comment on that.
Go ahead.
I don't see the draft of the minutes in front of me here, but I'm assuming that you're listing the names of the 6 people who were in the
Yes.
affirmative. Okay,
Yes.
then you're covered right there. Okay.
Thank you.
So we do roll call votes, Jim, and aye. Okay. That's
Okay,
true.
so-
So what Jim's saying is, Kathy, you don't need to do what you just said. It's covered. You're saying who voted. And so it's obvious John Rooney did not vote on the first set of minutes.
Right.
Okay, so just coming back to the draft January 28 minutes.
Yep.
Does anyone else have any questions, comments, concerns about them?
I've got a few, but they're
Okay, sure.
okay. All right. So can you go to line 77?
Yes.
Okay, very first sentence, toward the end of it, where it says, "Where does the money go?" Put, "Where does the rent money go?" That's what we're talking about. There's a rent account.
Okay.
Okay, and then this is my question. I didn't hear what we say there from that point on, so maybe I just didn't hear correctly. So we know we have 2 rooms at Finn that are used by Northborough pre-K students. We know that it's Northborough teachers that teach those 2 classes. We know it's Northborough buses that bring those students there. We know that pre-K students generally pay tuition. Did he say what we say there, that the tuition from those Northborough students goes into some type of revolving fund that we have access to? Did he really say that?
I think I know what the bigger picture point that Jason was trying to make.
Jason was concerned about them not paying rent for those spaces. But I don't think that they said what's said here, but maybe they did. Maybe I just didn't listen close enough.
When you say they, you mean the schools.
Yeah, the schools, when they were explaining, what goes on. Remember Greg made the point that it's not a one-way street, that we do things in Northborough too, that we don't get charged for. So he was trying to make the case, that's why they don't get charged for using 2 rooms at Finn.
And that's elsewhere in the minutes at that point.
Yeah, so I think it's that they weren't paying rent and the tuition paid goes into a joint account, but not to fund anything in Southborough. It's like a revolving fund just for that, but the money doesn't make its way to Southborough. That was my takeaway.
You don't have to guess. You can go back and watch that part of the meeting and you'll know.
Well, I did when I was writing this, because I found it extremely confusing. I'm assuming that you're talking about lines 81, 82, 83.
Yeah.
That area. Okay. The way, and I can go back again. The way I heard it was that the money goes into this revolving fund, but Greg made the point that there are other programs that, it was kind of like a, well, yeah, we don't, Southborough doesn't get that money, but they get the benefit of some programs that are done by Northborough.
He definitely said that. I agree with that. I just don't remember
84 to 85.
the tuition from the Northborough students going into a revolving account that we've got any access to.
Okay, so how about if I just go back, I'll listen to that and I'll come up with a revised.
Or just take it out completely.
Well,
I
I
don't
can,
think
that,
this is-
that makes it real easy.
Well, what about if, see, I think Jason's point was that the building is a capital asset of Southborough,
Yes,
generates income,
Correct.
rent.
Yes.
Yep.
So that income should go kind of like exclusively towards helping to maintain that capital asset, but it doesn't? Is that kind of?
well, that's two separate things. We know that they collect rent from Southborough Extended Day. We know they collect rent from the superintendent's office. And that's what basically comprises right now their revolving rent account. That's different from this. This is saying, so we now know too that we don't collect rent from Northborough for their use of 2 pre-K classrooms. That's a fact. He confirmed that. But he said, don't get too excited. Southborough goes to Northborough and does things too, and they don't charge you for that. So he thinks it's a pretty good wash as far as the towns benefit to each other. So Greg didn't seem to be supporting trying to collect rent from Northborough for the use of those 2 rooms. So that's a fact. Everything I said, that's a fact. But what it said here, it goes beyond that. It talks about a revolving account that looks like it's set up that the pre-K tuition that's paid for the, I guess, the 2 Northborough classes goes into some revolving account and that we've got access to it, but I don't think we do. So I just don't think that part's right. Nor is the sentence about insurance correct. I know that one's wrong. Northborough health insurance is offered through the region and not put on the town's operational budget. If you mean that we're not paying any of those teachers who are in Southborough, who belong to Northborough, we're not paying any of their health insurance. That's a true statement if that's what that says, but it's confusing. So I would just take out the piece starting with tuition and just get rid of it.
So take out on line 77 with the sentence saying tuition paid by.
Yep.
And just take it all the way out through line like 82.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So tuition paid by families.
Okay,
goes
but I
up.
would say, okay, one more thing. I would say this. I'd leave 82. JM clarified that there is no rent. This is what I would say. JM clarified there is no rent paid for using the space. So, because that's a true statement. So I would put that. I'd leave 82, but reformat it a little bit, rearrange it.
82 is going to say JM clarified that there is no rent used for.
Rent paid for using the space, and that's a fact.
Well, Kathy, I mean, why take out the rest of it? I think it's accurate and it makes sense. It just,
I don't think it's accurate, Andrew. That's what I'm saying. There's no revolving fund that we're getting a piece of from tuition from pre-K being put in from Northborough.
we don't, but
But Northborough does.
but Northborough, and then that, so
Well, why do we
Northborough has a
care
joint
where
one.
Northborough's tuition's going?
The Northborough's paying into a joint one, like it's
Joint with who? Okay, joint with who?
joint with Southborough,
Okay,
and they pay for things, some staff, some cost of the building, supplies, and then the remaining is split between Northborough and Southborough budgets.
okay, and it's not, that's what I'm trying to tell you. We do not get any money out of this thing in our budget. But it may be true. So maybe the true part of it is that Northborough puts their tuition for those 2 classes in an account that's considered a joint account. And from that, we get to pay some of the other expenses. We don't pay for the Northborough teachers. They're paying for their own teachers. So whatever else it costs to operate those classrooms, maybe we do get some of it back from this, but I don't think so. I really don't.
I don't think it goes into our budget, but anything left over, maybe they're using and spending things out of the revolving account.
Okay, all right, so we submitted expenses to the this revolving fund that's outside our scope. So I'm happy to clarify. I just want it right. Whatever is the case, I want it to be right there and not say this if it's not true. This was the first I've heard about this. That's why I'm surprised that this is going on.
Well,
I was surprised they weren't paying rent too.
I think the bigger question is if we have a joint revolving account that's part of the school's budget, why don't we see it in the school's budget, or why doesn't Carla or Brian have a report?
Why don't we know about it? Okay, how about this? Everybody agrees, so we don't belabor this, that Claire and I will work this out and get the language right with the minutes. So we'll make sure whatever is the case is right as far as how this is written.
It's great.
Okay, so
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
Okay.
And what I'll do is I will go back and I will actually earmark right on the tape so you can fast forward to that and listen. I'll listen to it again. I'll let you know where in the tape it is so you can fast forward to that. You can listen to it and then we'll talk and
Here, let's
come
just
to a
call the school and
consensus.
ask. Let's just call the school and ask them.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Okay, and I'll do. I
Okay.
got to call them anyway. I'm going to talk to them Friday morning. I'll ask the question. Okay,
Perfect.
then on 83, toward the end of the sentence, put rent again in the rent revolving fund account. They've got more than one revolving fund. That's why I'm trying to. We only talked about the rent revolving fund account. Okay.
Okay.
All right. One more thing. 92. At the end of 92, get rid of such as the Finn boiler. 50K was used, or whatever that number is. Something with 0K was used. The Finn
Oops.
boiler is not going to the rent revolving account. They're just using it as a placeholder to park things until they get their state money all situated. So the rent revolving account is not being used for the Finn boiler.
Okay.
Okay. All right. That's all I've got.
Kathy, are we going to get reimbursed for 2020 FY20 ones?
For what? FY20 what?
Bin boiler?
Yes. So Brian is, we're paying for about 2/3 of it. The state grant should be for another 1/3 of it. So when everything settles down, so Brian's got a short-term note out there now to pay for it. He'll get reimbursed and then he'll float a permanent note to when he has the final cost. So if that's what you mean by reimbursed, that was the original plan and that is what's going to happen. They're just using the revolving account because they had to pay some bills up front and they had to have a place to pay them from. So they'll get all the money back in the revolving account that they expended. Okay. All right. So anybody else on the minutes from the school committee meetings? The 28th. All right. So Andrew, go ahead.
I move that we approve the January 28 minutes as amended.
Second,
Roll call. Judy?
aye.
Cook, aye. Andrew, D.
Aye.
Mr. Martell?
Aye.
Mr. Pfaff?
Aye.
Mr. Mooney?
All right.
Okay, so 6-0 on the 28th. Now let's move to go ahead, Andrew, the next one.
Okay, the February 3rd minutes, I think we just circulated these today. So I don't know if everyone's had an opportunity to review them.
These
I
are
noticed,
These are only 2 pages.
that's right. Yep.
What a good idea.
Yeah, this
So-
was a meeting, we didn't, I don't think we reviewed any, this was really just, we didn't review a department budget. It was just kind of a discussion, right?
Yep, we
So-
just discussed several things. And I'm actually glad Jim has stayed with us. So this is what's happening, guys. Because these meetings are being recorded by Zoom, the people who are taking minutes can go back and rewatch the whole meeting, and therefore they can get all kinds of detail they would never get if they were taking these minutes live. So we're ending up with, I am on a committee where literally the minutes from a meeting were 25 pages. It took me hours to get through them on Sunday, hours. I don't have time for that. So what I have suggested to Claire is that she truncates these going forward. And that's why the February 3rd ones are a little bit less than what we said, that we still need to get the major decisions in, the votes, but you don't have to repeat what everybody said about everything. You can say, school committee brought up, we talked about rent, we talked about special ed. The Algonquins brought up they need a lot of money for capital going forward. They would like to see Southborough pass a article saying that there's going to be a capital stabilization fund, and then see their presentations that they gave us that had all the detail in it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessary in what you're getting at, Kathy, but I don't think it's required to say, well, AP said this, JB said that. I think if you just talk about, listen, we had questions about the special education, et cetera. certainly going to shorten them up, and it substantively addresses the point that we've discussed.
But the person doing the minutes, this is how long it takes to do minutes now. Person doing them, and I do one for this subcommittee I'm on. I go back and watch the whole meeting. That's an hour and a half. Then I go back and watch pieces of it. So that's another half hour. So that's 2 hours. And then it takes me another 2 hours to do the minutes. So I'm spending 4 hours doing minutes.
Too much.
Where I could be spending, 1 hour the way you used to do them and spending 3 hours actually working on the work of the committee. So we're just spending too much time having to read the minutes, change them, and write them. So I'm hoping that going forward that we're going to see more truncated minutes, and February 30 is a good start.
We used to say much discussion ensued.
Yeah.
Discussion.
I like that a lot, Judy.
We did. I mean, I think it was Sam who told me to do that.
Yeah. I mean, even Sam, who used to do such a great job with advisory minutes, he wouldn't have done all this back and forth, so-and-so said, because he wouldn't have had time to. He wouldn't have been able to participate in the meeting and write all that down. And he wouldn't have had it recorded. So he'd have to go in his notes and have minutes that were summaries of what we did. So Jim, are you trying to come back in?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
You just got to be careful. That last comment that Judy made, minutes a lot of times in the past used to just say that discussion about transfer station or something along those lines. There've been a number of rulings from the AG's office that the detail of the minutes has to be more, have more meat on them. Not a transcript, but sufficient that if somebody wasn't present at the meeting, they would know the gist of what the conversation was about. And frankly, I know myself when I've done minutes for the Board of Registrars of Voters, I've been too brief and I have to add more context to it. So there was a recent discussion about that on an AG decision.
Okay.
So we hear you. So I think there's a happy medium here to accomplish that, but in a very truncated format, and not, basically believing that you've got to put down everything everybody said and do something that's pretty close to a transcript. What I read this weekend, 25 pages, was pretty close to a transcript.
Yeah, that's not necessary at all.
So, okay. All right. So on that, so Andrew, you want to go back to the third?
Yeah. The one place where I thought we do need to clarify this is if you look at lines 48 through 58, discussion of non-budget proposed warrant articles. It's talking about how you reviewed your list as to which sponsors need to be scheduled to meet with advisory. And then you're talking about the 3 CPC articles that involve new projects. St. Mark's Bell Tower, that looks like a good description. Townhouse windows and facade at South Union Building, 2.2 million. That makes sense. And then 56, it says facade, ? I can't understand. I know that's because this is.
So you just get rid of the first part. It
Just get
should
rid-
say
okay.
calendar filled. That's all it should say, calendar filled.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. And I don't think it should say Casey reviewed her list. She reviewed the list. It's not my list.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't put these articles together. So just say reviewed the list.
Okay.
All right, and this is total my fault, Claire. On page 1 on line, you're going to change this twice. On line 32 and 33, and I knew I had this wrong, but I've got the acronym wrong. It's not NPR, it's NFP.
And S like in Sam?
Now, F is in Frank, P is in Paul.
Gotcha.
So Nancy, Frank, Paul. And I
Okay.
definitely said NPR. So you
That's all right.
you put
Yep.
down what I said, but it's wrong. It's NFP. Okay. And then
Do we know what it stands for, or doesn't that make any difference?
it's an insurance company in Boston,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I forget what they stand for. So just put in, they go
Oh,
by.
okay.
NFP.
All right.
All right, then line 39, I believe, is an error. Northborough does not require their employees to pay 40% of the medical insurance premium, and I don't think he said that. They've got the same deal we do. It's 75%.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
25%. So the town pays 75 and the employees pay 25, unless you're talking about one of the Medigap policies that are special policies. Those are 50-50, but the vast majority is 75-25. So there's no 40 that.
So Southborough does not pay 40% of the cost.
Well, you're saying no, Southport is
Okay.
not. Southport pays
Well,
75%.
just put a period at the end of 2 plans on a line.
Got it. Yeah.
Right.
Perfect.
Yep, I agree. Good fix.
Yeah.
All right, so that's, anybody else have anything on the 3rd?
I think just line 54, there isn't an article that has to do with South Union, right? So it's just the townhouse windows.
Well, you know, Andrew, that was really kind of interesting because I went back and I looked at that and I went cuckoo. It seems to me that there is one article that's talking about the townhouse windows, and then there's
But not
another
CPC.
article.
Not CPC. So CPC is not South Union. So he's right.
Okay.
This is CPC. So there is no CPC application for South Union.
Okay. Somehow South Union wiggled into the conversation, and I
It's
can't.
an article. It's an article. So we did talk about it.
Okay,
So there is
all
a
right.
placeholder in case the board of selectmen would like to ask the town for permission to, do something to that building, sell it, do something to it. So there is a
Gotcha. Okay.
placeholder for an article, but it's not a CPC article.
So it's just the townhouse windows.
Correct.
Yes.
Perfect.
Not
Thank
really
you.
$2.2 million, just the windows.
No, it's the windows and
And the facade.
exterior.
So Andrew, is the facade also at the townhouse?
It
Yes.
is the facade. I think it's also part of the roof. I think it's the gutters and some of
Oh, okay. All
the
right.
stuff. You
So
say
line
exterior
54, you
renovation
just
is-
strike at South Union Building.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then the South Union, I think, came up because we were talking about the historical, which opined on
Yes.
South Union, talking about that they would want to keep the facade,
Yes.
but
Gotcha.
it's not a part of the CPC articles that are projects.
And CPC will be in front of us in March, Tim Martell, as you requested with, and we will get all of their information ahead of time to read, so we know
Yeah,
why they decided what they did.
and Tim Litt just gave us what NFP stands for. Thanks, Tim. National Financial Partners Corp.
National Financial.
But we don't need to write it, just NFP is fine. They go by NFP.
Okay.
I deal with them all the time. They go by
Okay.
NFP. I've never heard them use that acronym other than NFP. So they really are NFP. Okay.
Interestingly enough, I did Google what I had before. Now I can't even remember what it was. And there is some kind of insurance consulting with the original ones that I had there.
Well, NPR is to me National Public Radio, so that's where I was getting it.
Oh, okay. All
I had
right.
that on the brain. So anyway, okay, so let's vote on these, Andrew.
Okay, I move that we approve the February 3rd minutes as amended.
Second.
Roll call vote. Judy,
Aye.
Cook, aye. Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye. Which
Mr.
one?
Mooney.
Aye.
Okay, 6-0, Claire. All right, we're all caught up in the minutes, Jim. Totally. Okay, all right, so let's talk about schedule. So I've posted meetings for the 24th. Remember, March repeats the same days as February. So then in March, the 3rd, the 10th, and the 24th. So we're not going to meet next Wednesday, Claire. She was worried I was going to forget to post because of Monday's holiday. So
Actually, I thought you guys were going to post a meeting for Tuesday, the 16th.
no,
Okay. All right.
so we've got
Perfect.
next week off completely. So we are not.
Perfect.
Okay.
Whew.
All right.
What
So
will I do?
we're going to meet on the 24th, the 3rd, the 10th, and the 24th of March. So on the 24th, when we're back next, we're going to hear from the Municipal Technology Committee. The whole committee's coming. They've posted a joint meeting. And we're going to hear from the Board of Health again, so they can continue to make their case for adding the 2 permanent positions, actually 3, upgrading 3 part-time positions for fiscal year 22 to permanent. Okay. And let's see what else I've got for. And then March, we're going to hear from CPC, capital planning, the plastics. So Michael Weishen, who's sponsoring the plastics ban, and then Peter Lapine, I think you say Lapine, who's sponsoring the noise bylaw. And then we'll get into the zoning articles and the downtown initiative, et cetera, shortly thereafter.
Do you want to do that later in March or?
Well, I look to you for guidance. I thought maybe we wait to the planning board's hearings take place so we can at least hear what they've got to say, what they ask, so we don't
Hey,
repeat it.
Kathy, what is the status of the Board of Selectmen's request to the department heads to go back and come back to them with a budget that reflected a 2% or something close to that increase? The reason I ask is because assuming they have done that, is that something that we are then going to have to discuss each department and whether we agree with those new figures or not?
The answer to your last question is yes. It's my understanding that they're dribbling in, and Brian's collecting them. And so when I talk to Brian and Mark next Wednesday, I should know more about what's in there. So yes, we obviously want to know what they are proposing to do, because we've got to end up with a budget we recommend at some point, and we've got to take whatever, we've got to figure out a way to get this budget down, I think, right? I don't think anybody's happy with 7.11 yet.
My fears at the beginning, it would be nice, and maybe it just can't be done, that the departments come to advisory really only once, as opposed to them having to come twice. But, I guess there's no other way to do it.
So you're saying you prefer that they don't have to come back? Is what you're saying?
No, I think they do have to come back if they have, substantively changed the budget that they presented to us.
Well, it's very easy. I imagine whatever they change is going to be a couple line items. So it's not hard for us to look at what they propose and talk about it without them necessarily coming back. We can
You're
let them
absolutely
know.
right, but I'd like to know if the budget has been, just, by way of illustration, it was 4%, now it's 2%. I'd like to know the impact on the community, et cetera, before I can offer my support or non-support for that budget.
Well, we could also ask them to basically write us a quick memo, letting us know how they made the cuts that they were asked to make. So we could do it that way. We can let them know when we're going to talk about what they have done, so that if they want to come, they can without requiring them to come.
Yeah, and Kat, I think that's a great idea. And if this is just an individual concern, I could certainly just reach out to the department heads so that I know. But I just think it's in terms of discharging our responsibilities of supporting or not supporting a budget, it would be nice to know exactly what we're supporting or not supporting.
And I'm with you. I know that you're concerned about what I am, and I think others are, which they're being asked to make arbitrary cuts again after doing it last year. And there's just so much you can cut. So what I'll do is when we meet on the 24th, I will at least know where the process stands. I would try to have it all together in some form that you can look at it on a spreadsheet to show what they've done. And then we will be able to then go forward in late March, early April, and decide whether we have anything on that list we agree with. And we can ask in between for each department to write us a quick memo, just summarizing what they did.
And to the extent they were unable to do that, and I missed the beginning discussion. I didn't miss it. I didn't understand. Jim, were you saying that the they still have to publish the warrant under a time restriction, even if we're going to kick it off to sometime in the summer?
He was. And that's
So
not what we were hoping for.
There's more than a few that we'll have to make our vote or position known at town meeting.
Yep. So if that happens, I really hope we end up with that screen that we had, started using that shows advisory's position, because at that point it can show that we actually did vote instead of looking at the warrant and saying they didn't vote.
Kathy,
Yes.
to John's point, the authority that was enabled us last spring to defer the town meeting, that authority was granted to the moderator only if the warrant had been posted by the selectmen. It's pretty clear. I'll be happy to send you a copy of it. And that's something that that's looking to have to work with, but that's.
Yeah, Jim, I wasn't doubting you. Don't think that. It's just that
Sure.
It really compresses the time we have to the extent that we have to go over again the budgets that we've already heard the discussion on.
It does. I spoke to the Marty Healy this afternoon, and he's going to look into some options, see if there's another way around it. But that is the way the statute reads.
But maybe, Jim, one little benefit here is if we know the town meeting is going to be postponed and we just have to have the warrant posted, we don't have to post it as early as we normally do, or is there a rule as far as when it has to be posted relative to the meeting?
Okay. The bylaw, the warrant article, excuse me, the signed warrant has to be posted at least 7 days before the date of the meeting. So if the meeting were to be held on the 27th, it would have to be posted on the 20th, at least on the 20th.
But of course, he's got to get it printed. So he always wants, a few
Signed-
weeks to get it printed.
Right, signed, printed, and article. But of course, that gets to the point that the fact that the warrant, which is only a warning to the residents that these topics will be discussed, that doesn't necessarily mean that those would be the motions introduced on the floor and you could introduce a different budget. So there's a bunch of different options that they have in play, and I'll leave that to, obviously, to Mr. Healy and other folks to figure that out.
Okay. So it is what it is. We will see. Thank you. Anybody have anything else to discuss?
I just want to say I forwarded everybody an email from Recreation about I think Tim had some questions last time of Calendar Field. So talking about the drainage and a couple different firms signing off on it and talking about the improvements, but we can have, I'm sure we could have Tim Davis or somebody come in and talk to it if we still have questions.
So in your email, do you have the actual report that was done by this last group?
Correct. Well, a couple different groups.
Okay, all right. So yes, you definitely wanted that. All right, that's good. Anything from anybody else? All right. Anything from our public? So seeing none, Judy,
I move we adjourn.
Second.
roll call vote. Judy,
Aye.
Cook, aye. Mr. Dennington,
Aye.
Mr. Martell,
Aye.
Mr. Pfaff,
Aye.
Mr. Rooney.
Aye.
All right, see you guys in 2 weeks. So we've got a little bit of a break here. Thanks, Jim, for coming.